All right, if I'm gonna keep it a bean, if you got a degree, don't be out here telling niggas to not go to college. Because at that point, you're hypocrites, you're a liar, you're a charlatan, you're leading everybody amok. Because some of your faves who are in this content space, your faves who are entrepreneurs, your faves who are out here with these high paying jobs might have a bachelor's. And we just honestly need to be more honest around like what this conversation is and what the realities are that come along with it, not just from anecdotal evidence, but also from research that's been conducted as well. I do believe that a college degree has afforded me a level of access, economic prosperity, but also different opportunities that lended itself. So I am somebody who has a bachelor's degree. I have a dual degree in digital multimedia broadcasting and theater studies. And both of those, that simple piece of paper, it's a good tool to use in the real world. So I'm going to break down some of the research that I found, some of the conversation that's being had, but also my thoughts on what were the benefits of having a degree versus just talking about my overall college experience. So I'm going to throw up a little graphic here for y'all so y'all can read along as I say this study out, and then we'll get into the breakdown of the fuller conversation. So according to, let me try. Should have did this a little sooner than later. On healthpolicy.usc, they've talked around life expectancy declines for Americans without a 4-year college degree. A 25-year-old American with a university degree can expect to live a decade longer than a contemporary who dropped out of high school. Although researchers have long known that the rich live much longer than the poor, this education gap is less well documented and is especially marked in rich countries. And whereas average Americans' expected span has been flat in recent years and strikingly even fell between 2015 and 2017, that of the 1/3 with a bachelor's degree has continued to lengthen. This disparity in life expectancy is growing according to new research published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, using data from nearly 50 million death certificates filed between 1990 and 2018. Ann Case and Angus Deaton of Princeton University analyzed differences in life expectancy by sex, race, ethnicity, and education levels. They found that the lifespans of those with and without bachelor's degrees started to diverge in the 1990s and the early 2000s. This gap grew even wider in the 2010s as the life expectancy of degree holders continued to rise while that of other Americans got shorter. Why is that important to know? As we're in this age of content creation, as we're in the age of the entrepreneur, the rise of the real estate agent, and everybody else, we're also able to find data that also supports the fact that, a 4-year degree actually matters. And you already know niggas and niggas only. So I'm thinking around like, what is this disparity in race? And so if white people are impacted by this, it's also black people that are being especially impacted by this thing as well. And so I know I'm somebody who I really enjoyed my college experience for the most part. I think the education value was there. I had the opportunity to study abroad, and I knew getting out of the hood was my ticket to just be greater, right? Because I expected more out of my life. And even as I was expecting that, it was always everybody on the block was like, all right, Marquise, we know you're college bound. You're going to college. We're going to expect you to make it. You got to do this X, Y, and Z. But that's just something I've just heard, right? It's something that I believe to be true. Like, if I am the one who can make it, then I go out to college and I can come back and I'll be like the reigning champ. Like, all right, Marquise, you made it. If you did it, then you can inspire the rest of us to want to go back to school. And I got to see a lot of that happen. But I also recognize what was alarming to me about this study is like, I look at me and my siblings. I'm the only one with a 4-year degree, and the rest of them dropped out of high school. So it already is making me think around like, what is their quality of life? What experiences and hardships are they having? But also like where I find myself at odds is like, what do I denote as success, right? What do I denote as like a necessity? And so my degree has afforded me job opportunities. It has afforded me access to circles that otherwise me without a degree, I don't even know if I would have the respect to get into those circles, right? Just simply off of a piece of paper. And so as I'm like thinking around this research and this conversation, if they're thinking around the 50 million, at this point, I'm just like, white people, they gonna live. They got resources, they got access. But to see like, no matter on race, it's actually superseding as we look at more of this data. So now it's the education aspect that is over top of just race. It is now who has access to a degree. And those degree holders are the ones who are living a decade longer. And so it is making me think about, I said, dang, I always think as a black person, I got about 65 years and then I'm on borrowed time. But now looking at this, maybe I got 75, right? But I wanted to have this conversation because I don't know if this whole college isn't for me or this whole don't go to college, there are other opportunities out there is always a feasible argument, because I think that's a very privileged thing to say. I think it is a moment to just say like, well, I didn't have a great experience in college and so you're not going to have a great experience in college. That's not just a singular story. I know I've heard that from other people who may have dropped out. I know I've heard that from those of us who graduated. But I think the collegiate experience versus getting the degree, I think we can also separate the two. Because I will say, like, I know if I have my 4 years, I'm at least making $40,000, right? I have access to get those jobs that get me up to close to middle class, if not into middle class, right? And I was able to benefit from my degree. Am I utilizing my actual degree? Hell no. I went to communications. I went to theater. I ended up in education. So who knows? But the piece of paper got me what I needed, right? And gave me just access to explore different jobs that required this document, right? And so that's one of like the pieces I'm thinking around is my own proximity to success and what I deem as success or deem as getting more access versus like this cultural push to say like niggas don't need college. I actually will argue that we should expand to post-secondary options. So fellowships, trade schools, at least get your associates, right? I always say like try college at least for your first or second 1 or 2 years. I think it's a very valuable experience because you're being launched into a space that you're not used to, but it's teaching you how to navigate in just outside of your zip code, outside of your 4 or 5 block radius of what you're used to. So I think that's one. I think the other part is I'm thinking around the opportunities that I had and just simply leading the movement and organizing in my hometown. I was able to get into spaces because people saw, oh, Marquise went to college, so he obviously has to have some type of knowledge. And I hate that idea because I'm a firm believer in like, I don't need a degree to be smart. I've always known I was smart. But it's the reality of like how the rest of the world is going to ultimately treat you. And so if you are out here telling kids like college is not the answer, college is not the way to go out, don't go because of crippling debt. I think the debt is a good conversation and point to have just to be mindful of like what your money going to look like after college. But to outright say this, I do believe is a dangerous topic. I think it's a dangerous perspective when you don't have like if you don't have that experience, but you don't know the access that it afforded. And so for me, I think it's almost hypocritical if I'm like, college, don't do it, child. Don't do it. Follow your dreams. Do what you must. But knowing like I'm able to be a content creator because of part of the cushion that I have. I will always say I'm a nigga with options. Like, even if this content thing don't work out, I know my degree is going to put me in some type of job. I know the network that I got from college is going to give me some type of job. Me just simply being a black man with a degree, someone going to find something for me, right? And so those are things I'm thinking about, especially as I'm like looking at this research and especially as I'm looking at like the breakdown. It is important to note like, yo, if you just simply want to live longer, if you just want to make at least 40,000 and be comfortable with that, in your living conditions, that's all tangible. It just takes a little bit more time to get there. And it's sometimes I do think the humane part is, even if you think about the pandemic, our relationship to education changed because education is more of an investment. So you're taking much more time. And so I can also empathize with the kid who's just like, I just need to work to put food on this table because waiting 4 years is just too long. And so that's the other part that I think around as we think around privilege, we think around access, we think about the current conditions that were bred from the pandemic in itself, I worried about high schoolers more in particular because they had to go to work. I'm not going to school because I have to provide a little differently. Oh, well, my mom got fired, so I have to work at Fresh Grocer. I know some of my old high schoolers had to just like negotiate, like, all right, I can only go to school half the day and I have to work for the next 8 hours. So going from school to 8 to 12 and then working for the rest of that time. So almost like carrying this double load, and like good for them for like having a little bit more like cushion and the will to do it, but I just don't know if it's always fair. So I think about the level of choices that are being had in this conversation too. And so I'm thinking around, like, as we are engaging in this conversation, make sure that you're just being mindful of, one, do you have a degree and you're telling somebody else not to get a degree? I need you to reflect on yourself and really think about what benefits did I get from having this degree simply by going to college? But the other part is there's real economic and life expectancy issues that are tied to this. And you can only imagine if they're not even just focused on black people, but they're focused on everybody. And if white people are experiencing like less life expectancy, maybe we don't got that extra 10 years. Maybe I got a good 7. Maybe I got a good 5. I don't know. But have that conversation and be a little bit more intentional, because the degrees do matter, and they only matter, and I'm saying them as a tool, not denoting it as a marker of success or a marker of like you're better than anybody, but just know this is something I can use just to kind of help my life of living or help my quality of life, and just have access to different things. So as you're engaging in these conversations, whether you're a young person, whether you're a person with a degree, whether you're somebody who went to trade school, somebody who did a fellowship, I would just love to know your thoughts and your own experiences leaving here, because this conversation to me, it requires more than just a quick 10-minute video. So it's a topic I'm definitely going to revisit with a little bit more nuance, but definitely in conversation with somebody else without a degree, somebody who went to a trade, and somebody with a 4-year degree. What are we all experiencing in this moment? And like, how do we round out the options? Is there a level of regret that's being had? Is there a level of privilege that we're able to acknowledge? Did this entrepreneurship could have been expedited if I would have just stayed out of school, or did it expedite because I did have the degree? I don't know if there's necessarily all the data behind that, but I would be super interested just to learn from some people's other experiences. So if you're in the comments, please let me know, what was your experience, whether you have a 4-year degree, no degree, a high school diploma, a certificate from your trade, whatever the case may be. Let me know what that experience was like. I'm very fascinated by this information. I'm excited to see like how others are responding to this information, but keep thinking around post-secondary options if you are still in high school. If you are somebody who has a degree, please make sure that you're being mindful around what you're saying and being reflective on your own benefits from this. I appreciate this conversation. I'm excited to see how people respond to the conversation and add a little bit more nuance, add a little bit more of their own personal experiences as well with this. But this is some of the stuff where I'm just like, this research is important for everybody to have access to. And so I'll make sure to drop the link of Business Insider, but also this health publication as well as we get into it. So once again, this is just another conversation that you can have over a really good cup of coffee. So let me know what you're having. If you know any coffee brands that are willing to collaborate or want to sponsor this show, please let them know. I am fully into like the coffee world. Black and Bold has been my go-to. They have a really good Ethiopian coffee, particularly with blueberry, chocolate, and honey notes. So if you're really into that, utilize the French press, get whole beans, get a coffee bean grinder, and you're going to get like all the flavors pop it out you, and just like add a little bit of sugar. It's everything you're going to need and more. So thank you for joining me for another episode of Keeping It a Bean. I'll make sure to link everything in the description below. I hope to see you next week, and peace.